and welcome to episode 7 of Tintincast.
Episode 7?
Episode 7, book 7.
Well, I'm glad you have that. Is that, what version is that?
88, this one. So that's 33 years old. Smells good for an old book, actually. I also have, the Danish version, Den Sorte,
Oh, nice.
and Die Schwarze Insel.
And which one is the purloined version? Because one has been removed from a library somewhere, has it?
This is definitely the purloined version. Yes, courtesy of Harrogate Grammar School. There we go.
I thought it was a French version you had. Okay, it was German.
German
How very
version.
educational and presumably only taken to get your German levels up.
Oh, yeah, because I was doing German at school. And so I needed this to, and I just forgot to take it back and in no way stole it from the library of my school.
Well, we do have viewers with a connection to the Harrogate Grammar School, so
yeah. Well, you know where I am now. You can come find me. The police will be around any minute. Yeah, Black Island, because it was always one of my favorites. This one, and I think it was the first one I read. So this is why I've got so many different versions of it. Ooh, that one smells particularly good. Yeah. I remember every single page of it. And when I was reading it today, I was like, yeah, I know this. I know this book so well. I know everything someone says and every single bit of action. It all came flooding back.
It was, for me reading it, it's the first book that I've just read in one sitting. It was a very, very easy read. And I'm not sure if that's because Hergé has just become a more fluid storyteller at this point, or whether maybe there's slightly less going on in it than some of the earlier books, but it feels like it flows really nicely.
Yeah, it might be a bit more simple, but at the same time it's so confident, it's so fast moving, and when you actually compare it to, it doesn't have like the dense plot of the last couple we read, certainly not The Broken Ear, which is quite Sherlocky. This one is more of a mystery than the detective skills. It's more of I'm going to go check that out because there's some weird story about that place and that one. But it's still got all of the planes, trains, automobiles, boats, all the action, all the jokes. It's really entertaining one. It's very slick. And obviously, again, we can go into it, but I think it was definitely inspired by a certain film. I think it was directly inspired by a certain film.
Yeah, well, shall I set the scene a bit
Yes.
then? So, picture it, March 1937. Hergé is visiting the UK to do some research on a book. So I think this is the first time he's really travelled to do any research. So he travels to the UK. He travels actually to London and the south coast of England, but manages to completely fail to go to Scotland, despite the fact that half the story is set in Scotland. Given the events on mainland Europe in 1937, I guess Britain must have seemed quite appealing to Hergé as a more tranquil setting for a Tintin adventure, and it feels somewhat, I think, escapist, maybe because of that. I think Hergé's idea of the British Isles does seem to be a bit quaint as well, so we can go into that. But that aside, I suppose it wasn't an entirely happy time for Hergé, which we touched on in the last few episodes. He has now left the offices of the 20e siècle newspaper, and he's working from home as a freelancer, which seems to give him more time to focus on the quality of the Tintin stories. And his work is improving, and his working practices are improving, but he's also overworking, and he's getting burnt out, and he's quite unhappy because of it. His wife essentially said that he's always working, even on weekends. He worked at night on Saturday and Sunday, Christmas, New Year, Easter. He didn't like going to the theatre or the cinema because he felt that was watching like watching something that he did already himself. So he's drawing adventures of Tintin, Quick and Flupke, Joan Jette, and advertisements for the Hergé studios. He's doing a lot of marketing through the studios as well. Germaine seems to be helping quite a lot, actually. She seems to be his main collaborator at this time, and she's helping with the jokes. She's helping draw the frame borders, retouching drawings. So she's doing quite a lot just now. And the Black Island was serialized in the Petit 20e between April 1937 and June 1938. It was published in black and white by Casterman as a book in 1938, colorized in 1943, and then there was a color remake in 1966, which we can go into because that's quite interesting as well.
And it's the first one, I think, where the Thompsons are, well, in the Blue Lotus, they're in it quite a lot, but their style now is the classic Thompson style. They haven't got the squat with the big noses and the squat faces anymore. It's slightly more elongated and it's slightly more classic. In fact, the whole book is, the version I've got, which is the 80s version, there's nothing in it of previous style of Tintin.
I think these were the ones, the editions you have there are the 1966 redrawings, and apparently Hergé just drew the characters in that particular version, and he had one of his associates go over back to Scotland and the UK to get really detailed research into the backgrounds, into the scenery. So that was all redrawn by his partner.
There's a colour TV in it at one point, and they changed it back to black and white because that would have been accurate for the time. And Loch Lomond whiskey is changed from Johnny Walker, and things like that. There were the pub names and certain things that they changed for the 60s just to make it a bit more, well, slightly fictional and also accurate.
Yeah, I heard that it was the English translators, actually the great English translators, Michael Turner and Leslie Lonsdale Cooper, when the book was scheduled to be released in the UK, they essentially insisted, and they had this kind of working relationship with Hergé, they insisted that essentially Hergé corrected all the mistakes that they made. Methuen, who was going to be the publisher, I think identified 130 factual mistakes that Hergé made in the original book. And apparently, this is a quote from Leslie Lonsdale Cooper. She said, of course, by that time, Tintin had got a considerable following, and it would have been a mockery to publish a Tintin book that was so very inaccurate about this country. So Hergé redrew it for us. So it seems to be very much at their request.
Like you say, it's very quaint, and it's no more a caricature of Britain than the Carry On films or any American film that comes to visit the UK. It's always a little bit quaint, and we're all vicars and Scottish caricatures and stuff like that. But it's harmless and it's fun. As a British person, I don't find it offensive. But it's the first book I can say where I'm like, well, I don't find it offensive as a British person. Not a Scottish person, though. So I don't know if Scots, as a citizen of Scotland, Marcus, would you think that this book be seen as offensive?
I don't think so. I mean, it's not dissimilar to something like A Whiskey Galore, is it? It's that kind of caricature of Scottish life.
And so, shall I mention the film this very heavily cribs off?
You go ahead.
It's Hitchcock's The 39 Steps.
I thought that's what you might be saying.
Well, I think Hergé had read the book, but he also had seen the film by then, which came out in the 30s, and he very much liked the style. And this is one thing I've always liked about the Black Island is that, first of all, it's the first British adventure, so it's obviously very relatable. And as a kid, I was probably about 12, 13 when I read it, maybe a bit younger actually. It's very relatable. It feels like, this is when I was a child, I thought Tintin was a British lad because of this. And obviously you do. It's translated. You don't think of it necessarily as, oh, he's Belgian. You just think he's a British chap. And obviously the Thompsons come across as, they're quite Belgian, but they seem like British detective.
Yeah, with their bowler hats, totally they could be. And I think the Thompsons have some of their finest moments in this book.
Yeah, they do. The slapstick is brilliant. The stuff with the suitcases in the train and the handcuffs together, which is from 39 Steps. Well.
That's 39 Steps, isn't it? Yeah.
Crashing into the lamppost, trying to separate, but they're stuck together. All that kind of stuff there. The Thompsons, I think this is their first absolutely in character, brilliant story for them, and they're in it throughout as well. Tintin keeps bumping into them, which is really fun. The running jokes in this are great, with the Thompsons not being able to fly a plane and having crashes and constantly giving Tintin giving them the slip.
Yeah, it's like we're how many books in with the Thompson twins and they still don't trust Tintin. It's always, oh, okay, so we need to arrest you for something else, Tintin. What have you done wrong this time? That's
it. And they're like, you're not forgotten about the train, Tintin. He's like, oh, for Pete's sake. And they're such terrific characters because you can just, they're the Keystone Cops, aren't they? You can just wring every ounce of comedy out of them. Whether or not they are spoiling the bad guys or just getting in the way, they are really funny. So that I love the constant running gag of them running into the Thompsons, and I also love that Snowy is fantastic in this book. The fact that he constantly is looking for the bad guy. He finds a bone. There's a running joke with a bone which goes on and on for about 10 pages, which is great.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, a lot of callbacks in this one, because when the Thompsons get into their air acrobatics, you kind of forget that they're stuck up there in a plane and they don't know how to fly it. And then at the end, Tintin's like watching television, which is obviously this kind of new invention in Britain at the time, and sees the Thompsons doing their aerobatics.
Yeah, it's a great comedy moment, isn't it? He's like, "Oh look, something's on telly," and then we know what's happening on telly. There's one bit where Tintin's just walking through this village and he goes past the White Hart pub. And Snowy, another running joke is Snowy keeps accidentally getting drunk on whiskey, well, on purpose eventually. And this cane appears from the pub and yanks Tintin in, and lo and behold, it's the Thompsons. And he's like, "Oh, not you again," quickly gives them the slip again.
Snowy is, before Captain Haddock comes into the books, Snowy is the one who's always getting drunk at inopportune moments.
He is, isn't he? Yeah, it's like, "You wretched drunken dog. This is what you get for drinking whiskey." There's a great shot of Snowy lying back on the train, just letting the whiskey drip into his mouth like a happy little fella. So he is a comedy foil. Yeah, he is the Captain Haddock of the early books, isn't he?
So let's talk a bit about the baddies as well, because there are some particularly bad baddies in here. I mean, Dr. Muller seems to be this nod to what's happening. There's this German connection going on, and we get this German villain, although apparently inspired by a Scots-born forger called George Bell, who apparently was also a secret agent, but I don't know much about him, and who had been a strong supporter of the Nazis in the 1930s and was an associate with the co-founder of the Brown Shirts as well. Right. But he's also, I was looking at, there's this great shot of Charles Laughton in a film called The Island of Lost Souls, and he obviously seems to have been based on the look of Charles Laughton in this film as well. This is a 1932 film.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. He is influenced by movies, Hergé. Obviously, cinema was huge by the time the 30s rolled around. So he will have seen all these great villains in movies and thought, he did actually Muller does remind me of a sort of Bond villain. He's like a precursor to maybe Blofeld or someone like that, because he's got a lair. And also reminded me of the Beast Must Die. He's got all traps set up, and Tintin springs the trap, and then look, there's someone in trap number 9.
I thought his henchman was called Number 9 for a while there. It's like, check who's in the trap, Number 9. It's like, who's Number 9? But yeah, he's got this kind of country pile, which apparently was based on Rudyard Kipling's house in Sussex.
I've been there.
Yeah,
it's an amazing house, actually. I fell in love with Rudyard Kipling's study. It's the most incredible room. He has this huge globe and all these obviously books and desks everywhere and stuff. There's some lovely artwork in the villain's house. Like we managed to get a 3rd page this time. He does quite a few of these, and he does the 3 when they're going to push Tintin off the cliff.
They're quite tall. Yeah.
And that's really, obviously, Hergé, I think he's being a bit more of a flourish after what we saw in The Broken Ear, where he was obviously rushed and he just rushed a few panels. And there weren't any bigger than just that. Whereas this has got, and it's got this lovely one where he's fighting the bad guy, which is just phenomenal. And that's very, again, it's like a precursor to North by Northwest or something. You know, he finds himself in this, like you say, in this country pile with the bad guy fighting the bad guy. And the henchman's there, and they're fighting by the fire, and Tintin has to escape and stuff. It's just really well worked out. And then you've got the bumbling fire department, who are like the Keystone Cops.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Tintin's like dying of smoke inhalation, and they're all trying to get the keys out of the tree from a bird.
Yeah, and the magpie takes the key, doesn't it? Because that, in Castafury Emerald, obviously, there's something very similar.
But yeah, I love that. I love Tintin sneaking around the villain's lair, pulling up cables to work out where the lights are, where the plane's going to land, that kind of thing. It's like low-level James Bond stuff, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few baddies. There's this kind of Ronzoff and Ivan as well, who are kind of hanging about, and another henchman as well. I couldn't quite work out the hierarchy of the... it doesn't really matter, I suppose, but I couldn't quite work out the hierarchy of the baddies, whether Ronzoff was heading things up or whether it was Dr. Muller. But Ronzoff, he's the kind of bald guy with the big beard who seems a bit psychotic.
Yeah. And he's mostly encountered on the Black Island. So
maybe he's head of operations there, maybe. Yeah, and Ronzoff seems to be Ranko's trainer as well.
He might be the sort of odd job, like his special skill is training a gorilla and and running the island. You know. That
must be a great job advertisement.
Yeah, wanted gorilla trained to run complex base of operations on Scottish Island. No time wasters, please. So again, Muller is a good, solid villain because he feels like the rich, corrupt, you know, bad guy with a big house who's just controlling everything. But he's got this underground. It's like an underground lair, isn't it? And then he's got an actual secret operation far, far away, which no one will ever find, except Tintin's very tenacious. So obviously he's gonna find it.
And just in case anyone does find it, there just happens to be this massive gorilla on the island to ward them off. The Beast of Kiltoch, or Ranko.
Ranko, yeah.
Which seems to be, Ranko seems to be a kind of, obviously Hergé's heard about the Loch Ness Monster, and apparently in the year before this book, there's been a lot of sightings of the Loch Ness Monster, and also King Kong, which was hugely popular at the start of the 1930s. In fact, there's a scene where Ranko is holding Snowy in his grip, which is almost taken straight out of King Kong and Fay Ray from the movie.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. And she goes, ah, and he goes, roar, and Ranko's terrified of him. I love the phonetic Scottish that the old man in the pub comes out with. I think this is where I first learned the phrase "Hoard your wisht," which, as you'll know, as an honorary Scotsman, it means "shut up." But you can actually, if you try, and you can actually say when he says, "'Tis a terrible beast as times in the nicht, when the winds frae the sea, you can hear it wisht, d'ye hear?" It's a really like Rabsy Nesbitt accent. But I like the fact it's a nice touch that they actually attempted to put this in phonetic Scottish.
I think the translators always do a wonderful job, not just translating the humor of this, but the names, the curses that Haddock has, but also this more dialectal stuff. When it was redrawn in the 1960s, there were actually some real locations taken for these various places, and in Scotland it was the Black Isle is based, well, the castle is based on this Craig Dewey castle on the Isle of Arran, and Lochranza Castle, and Kiltoch, this fictional village, is based on Castle Bay in Barra in the Western Isles, which I've been to, which is a lovely, lovely place. And it's not based on the Black Isle, which is not an island, but a peninsula on the northeast of Scotland. This story is more set on the west coast of Scotland, so Hebrides, And then there's a whole bunch of settings in England as well. So the station where he's setting off to the north is Bishop Stortford, apparently.
Right.
And then Puddlecombe, is it? And is Littlegate the village in the book, and Eastbury, which is East Down in the book.
That's it, East Down. That's it. Yeah. And that's what I love. One of the things that I always loved about this book is the locations, the station, the train, the airfield, the castle. The castle is very Tomb Raider, actually. I mean, obviously this came first. I love the way the castle's depicted as this abandoned but beautiful ruin, and the detail on the beach and in the cave, and the way the cave leads up to the counterfeiters den. I love all of the style of it. I think it's really, really classic, which is probably why I read it about 70 times as a kid. I just loved this book. It's so fun.
And did you know that there was a stage play based on this in the 1980s?
I didn't, but I know there's a Don Jolly series called Don Jolly and the Black Island, which I will have to seek out. But no, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can see this is the stage play. You'll see an actor there with a bit of a quiff and some very small gorilla, and actually a lady in this particular play. But apparently, in the late 70s and early 80s, there were 2 Tintin plays produced by the Arts Theatre in the West End of London, and they were adapted by Geoffrey Case for Unicorn Theatre Company. And the first one was adapted from Tintin in America, and it was called Tintin's Great American Adventure. And then Tintin and the Black Island was adapted in 1980, and it then toured. There is a review actually from the Times, and the review in the Times of this play says, comic relief supplied mainly by the Thompsons is not up to much, but villainy of the reliable German variety is fast-moving and ruthless, and even generates some laughs of its own, particularly from Hugh Hayes, who goes through the show with an upraised plaster-encased arm, which serves variously as a Hitler salute and a coat hanger. So you kind of get the feel of it. And this is a play that apparently went on to tour around different parts of the world, and was certainly playing in Canada and Quebec, at least as late as late 1984.
It sounds quite panto, doesn't it? It sounds quite music hall.
Yes. Well, shall we give this one a rating on the 7 crystal ball scale before we move on?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to have to give this one the first 7.
Wow.
You like, if you said to me which is the cleverest, which is the most brilliant, which is the most involved, it's not the Black Island, but it's just such a damn good book, and there's a reason why I love it, and it's because it's just perfect. It's a perfect kids adventure. It maybe because it's in the UK, it's just really special. It's very memorable. It's the first one I kind of fell in love with, and the other ones I tended to drift towards, whereas this one I just kept coming back to time and time again, and it never disappoints. I just think it's iconic and funny and classic, and there isn't a bad panel, there isn't a bad page. So yeah, it's getting seven crystal balls from me.
Hey, fantastic. I'm going to be, I feel like Scrooge now, because I did love it. I read it in one sitting. I kind of completely just devoured it. It flows really well. Some of the Thompsons' best work is in there.
Yeah.
I like a lot of the when Hergé throws himself more into the political situation. I've really liked that in the last few books, and that was a bit missing for me, that it does really try and stay away from all of those bigger political themes. And yeah, it is a little derivative of the 39 Steps and King Kong, so it's got a lot of it's borrowed from other places as well. So I'm going to give it a 5.
I would give it 5.
I did love it, but I just felt that it wasn't as packed as some of those other adventures, and I know that we've got some big ones coming up as well. So I feel really bad about doing that now.
No, I mean, you gave Blue Lotus 7, and I gave it 6, and again, it's very personal, because if you were to say what's the most accomplished Tintin book, I wouldn't say the Black Island. If you were to say what's, it doesn't have haddock in it, it doesn't have. I just think Black Island, in terms of just this perfect little story taken on its own,
It is. It's absolutely a complete world that Hergé builds.
Yeah, and now he's put Tintin on his feet. Tintin can go off and just do anything, and it's going to be like, this is just a solid adventure. It hits the ground running, and then obviously next book, King Ottokar's Scepter, he gets back to being a bit more lavish, a bit more political, a bit more complicated. But I think maybe he enjoyed Black Island because of its simplicity.
And the audience by this time, they know Snowy, they know Tintin, they know the Thompsons, so they're sort of in on the joke immediately, and Hergé can then do a lot more, probably quicker, with the characters because of that.
Yeah.
I am really interested to revisit King Ottokar's Scepter, because I remember that as a young boy, that being quite a challenging book to sort of understand the ideas and all the things that were going on in that book.
Well, that's it. It's kings and queens and power and castles and temples and politics and stuff. And you sort of think, oh, okay, well, that's not the Scottish island, the cover is just so beautiful.
It is.
And that's basically the adventure, is he's going to investigate this island in a boat with his dog. And I love Snowy's face. Snowy's face says it all.
Yes.
Snowy's like,
Well, it was, by all accounts, a hugely successful book and is one of Hergé's most popular adventures. And with its success, apparently Hergé starts to think more commercially, more ambitiously, and starts to make plans for bookshops entirely devoted to Tintin at this time, which obviously won't come to pass for a lot of years, but that will one day happen. I mean, it must have seemed extraordinary to even think that could happen back in the 1930s, that like one cartoon character could spawn that kind of merchandise and empire. Obviously, the world was a very difficult place in the 1930s, so that will all have to wait.
Yeah, I mean, the next book, I think, takes us up to the beginning of World War II, doesn't it?
To the beginning and beyond.
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting one. And again, like you, I can't particularly recall King Ottokar's Scepter in any detail, but I'm sure when I read it, I'll be like, oh, this one, right.
Very good. Well, I'm looking forward to King Ottokar, so I'm going to go away and start reading that right now.
Excellent. Yes, I think I'm going to read that one quite quickly, because I feel like it's been a long time between this one and last one, but it hasn't. It's only ever a week, isn't it? But it comes around quickly. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope a few nice comments online and stuff, people saying they're rereading them, which is always nice to, or people saying, oh, I don't know if I ever read Tintin, I'm going to start reading them.
I hear that Tintincast's persuaded some people to even try their hand at podcasting. I think apparently we've set the bar so low in terms of content and humor and production values that we've encouraged them that they could do an even better job, I think.
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't be too difficult, would it? But we got asked a question on Twitter the other day, it was earlier today, and it was Mike, I think. Mike, I think you know Mike.
And yes, said, Mike McQueen, yes.
Mike McQueen, and he said, why is it that I could never get hold of the Blue Lotus, and why was it only on some of the backs of some of the books?
I think we covered that pretty well, didn't we, the other day?
I think we did, yeah.
I think it was so political that it was one of the later ones that they translated, because it didn't disguise the fact that this was China and Japan that he was talking about. So I think Methuen were a bit... They didn't want to translate that immediately until Tintin built up a pretty firm fan base.
That's right. So Mike, if you're watching this one and you haven't watched our Blue Lotus episode, go watch that, because we do cover it in some detail.
Watch them in order.
Watch them in order, for God's sake. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. It does. So yeah, next week, King Ottokar's Scepter, which I'm having trouble saying every time I say it. And then we're into, that's the end of an era, because then we're into a new era of Tintin, but we have one more week of solo Tintin adventures. And yeah, I can't wait for the next one. In fact, I might go away and read King Ottokar's Scepter now.
Do it.
Over a pizza. Excellent.
See you next time.
Adios.
Thank you.